my name is Abby Rappaport. I'm the co-founder and publisher of Stranger's Guide. We're an award-winning publication that commissions stories from local writers and photographers to build authentic portraits of place from Scandinavia and Tehran to Colombia and Lagos. Learn more about what we do at strangersguide.com. But today, I'm very excited to introduce our wonderful speakers. Dr. Albert Bourla is the chairman and CEO of Pfizer, where he has spent more than 25 years. He's a doctor of veterinary medicine with a PhD from the Veterinary School of Aristotle University. He's a recipient of many awards, including the prestigious 2022 Genesis Prize, and he recently authored the new book, Moonshot, which gives readers a look behind the scenes at the historic and sometimes dramatic race to deliver the COVID-19 vaccine. Julie Hyman hosts the 9 to 11 show at Yahoo Finance Live with Brian Sozzi. She has been a financial journalist for more than 20 years, and before joining Yahoo Finance in 2018, she worked for Bloomberg Television. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here today. Obviously, this is a big topic that affects all of us, what we have seen in the last 2 years, and it's sort of emotional for me. This is the first time I've been on a stage with someone facing other people in person since all of this started, and it's due in part to this guy and his team, so it's pretty incredible. So Albert, thank you for being here. I want to start with the book. And there were some really interesting details about how you attacked the virus, what you did for your team. And even before the onset of COVID, you have a room with your executives that's called the Purpose Circle. It would be a normal conference room in any other company, but you've taken out the conference tables, you sit in a circle, and you have photos around the room that executives have put up of patients that have touched them in some way, which just demonstrates the stakes of what you do. So I want to start kind of with a big question, a big picture question. How do you manage a profit-making enterprise that's saving people's lives, a for-profit company that does something that has such a big impact? How do you sort of balance that?
Mm-hmm. I think the biggest misconception about the biopharma business model, it is that whatever is good for shareholders and whatever is good for patients is fundamentally at odds. Actually, the reverse is true. In the modern world, there is no way that the shareholders will see any return on the investments unless we will be able to provide tangible value for patients. That's the only way that shareholders can make money. If we do that well, that can become quite profitable for them. If we don't do that well, they will lose money. So I think it was not easy to align the two. It's just explain that let's focus on the one thing that matters, which is making breakthroughs that change patients' lives, and the rest will fall into place, including the profitability of the company. It's not that I'm saying we don't care about profitability. Unfortunately, it's not goodwill that will bring cancer cure. It is billions of investments from people that other people's money, investors' money, right? So, but I truly believe that we can have a very good sustainable business model that can only provide returns if we do good for patients.
And that was definitely demonstrated, I think, during the course of the pandemic. And it's evidenced in the book when you, at various points, basically say, cost is not an issue here. We need to get this done. And you make clear in the book, you put a lot of pressure on your team. You put a lot of pressure on yourself. You put a lot of pressure on your team. And when you demanded that your team have that workable vaccine by October 2020 and produce hundreds of millions of doses, they were taken aback, as you wrote. And I want to read a quick passage here. You say, rationally, they were right. It could not be done, but it had to be done. There's a time for consensus building and there's a time to push. This was the time to push. I told them that the plan was not accepted, period. I asked them to go back and rethink everything from the beginning and make the impossible possible. And obviously, you put a big ask on your team. I'm also curious, which you write a little bit less about in the book, about the pressure you put on yourself and what your state of mind was during those 9 months of 2020 while the team was developing the vaccine?
The pressure that every human being will have if he is responsible for delivering something that will impact the world. It was tremendous, the pressure, and I could feel every day because billions of people were placing their hopes on us. Hundreds of governments that were playing their hopes on us. Millions of businesses that were playing their hopes on us. That weighs heavy on your shoulder. But also when you understand that it happened that you are in a position when things happen that you don't have any other option than try to deliver a solution, also is a very strong driver. So when you know that if you fail, it's not about you, it's not about the company, it is way bigger, it's about the world. This is where you have this resilience that says, just do it, I don't care.
Did you have any ways of alleviating stress during that period of time?
Clearly, I was not reading Greek philosophers. Netflix, that was the thing. Wine, that was the thing. I did a lot of both.
What were you watching on Netflix?
I wrote it in the book, and many people ask me why. Gilmore Girls was the thing
That's
that...
right, yes.
Yeah, that was the big hit of the
Sure.
of the family. Yeah.
Why not?
My wife
Why
is
not?
sitting there actually, and together.
Yes, I could hear some giggles in particular from that part of the audience. So you were putting a lot of pressure on yourself and you were finding these ways to alleviate it. You also, as I mentioned, put a lot of pressure on your team, and in fact, the Wall Street Journal called you the pushy CEO, which you also refer to in the book. And you say in the book that you regretted some of these individual interactions. You didn't regret overall the push that you made. What kind of toll were you seeing it take on your people as well? And did you have, a lot of companies during this period of time have rethought their approach to mental health, to work-life balance, et cetera. Did you have to make any tweaks at Pfizer during that time?
Look, first of all, let me give you some background information. In Pfizer, we have 4 values. They are called courage, excellence, equity, and joy. The joy is if you create an environment that's joyful for everyone around you, peers, and everyone in this company, including me, every 6 months, we are scored by the people that are working for us and by our peers. So for everyone, basically around 20 people will give their opinion, around 10 people that are reporting to you and 10 people that they are the same group. And I was always having high scores. Actually, really, I was the number 1. I had very high scores. And in the end of 20, when I took the second semester test, my joy scores went down. And that was really a bell that rang for me. So something is going on in the way that I behave. And then I tried to understand it and analyze it, and it was, I will tell you what. It's not that people did that or they scored me low because I was putting a lot of pressure on them. Each one of them knew that I had to do it, and each one of them knew that without that, we wouldn't be able to move. And they were very much ready to forget and forgive. But during the process, as you said, I'm a human being, a lot of weight, so I lost it several times. I was unnecessarily unpleasant. It's not a push. It is that you express a dissatisfaction by being cynical or by yelling, or someone who tried so hard to do it and brings you the bad news, instead of doing the right thing and congratulate them for the work, you give them shit for not delivering. That I regret. It was a big mistake that I did, and particularly doing it into those people. Still those people, I think, because eventually the results were so rewarding for them particularly, that they were part of a story that saved the world. They forgave me, but they didn't forget, so that's why they scored me very low. And good that at least I knew that, because it's very easy to feel if you are in the top that because you brought the vaccine to the world, that's it, everything is good. No, they told me not everything is good. You need to be careful how you behave.
Have your scores gone back up in joy since then?
They did, but gradually, because reputation comes in drops. You can lose it in buckets, but comes back in drops. So once they score me low, now I need to earn back the trust that I can go back. But yes, they are.
And how do you do that?
Top of mind. I think many of us who can do a lot of things, if we just bring it top of mind, that's an important thing to do. If it was not part of the equation, how others feel when we work on a project, and the only thing that matters it is how to be successful, is a very different story than if it's top of mind that project needs to be successful and the others needs to feel good. You'll find a way to do it.
There was there were a number of emotional moments in the book, but one of the most emotional moments was when you gathered with your team to find out what the results of the trials were. What was the efficacy level going to be? And I'm sure many of us out here remember when you got the news, right, that there was this vaccine and this was the efficacy level, or some of the competing vaccines as well, but this sense of hope that we all had. And so you learned that the efficacy was 95.6% in that trial, and you describe the elation amongst you and your team. You went home, you held your children's hands, you were with your family. And for me also reading it, it was an emotional moment, the culmination of your work. And throughout the book, you just described feeling cynical at times or getting upset at times, but you also come across as very optimistic and determined that you're going to get it done. Did you ever feel discouraged? Did you ever think that you weren't going to be able to get it done?
I never felt that I'm going to drop the towel in, never. No, but we had disappointments virtually every day. That was a very complex project. It was touching multiple disciplines, from research to legal, to manufacturing, to regulatory, everything. And there were a lot of things happening. And many of them were positive because things were moving, but there were a lot of negatives every day. Some of these negatives were so negative that were binary. If we don't find a solution, the project is dead. And it could be just a small solution issue that we can't manufacture it. We realize that the product is not stable, for example. That's it, right? That could kill completely the project. So there were a lot of these moments. So that was creating a lot of ups and downs. And typically I would yell in moments like that. This is where I could feel the pressure. But I never thought that we can give a way out to anyone. So always was find a solution. Tomorrow morning a solution. And tomorrow morning we're there, and maybe there was not a solution, but there were some ideas. Tomorrow morning again. Now the ideas, I want them to be tangible solutions. And that's how we were able, and I'm sure that we were blessed, somehow to resolve all issues. But there were many.
Let's talk about a few of them, because, in people who are watching this process from afar, who are not people who are native to the pharmaceutical industry, it was really eye-opening reading about how the process worked. And one of the things that struck me is that when you're testing a vaccine, there's just a different approach. If you're testing something that is a life-saving medicine for someone who is already ill, there's a different burden of proof. You have less to lose, right? If the person is already ill, you want to help them. If someone is healthy and you're giving them a vaccine to prevent illness, it's a different barrier here. So how did you then accelerate the process in the trials? Describe to us a little bit about how the process worked.
First of all, you're absolutely right that vaccine is a very different standard of proof. And the benefit-risk assessment, it is way weighing that the risk needs to be very, very small. Because you give it to healthy people. It's different than when you give something to someone who has 2 years to live because he has cancer. That's a very different story. So that was the number one, that the risk is very different. Then in all drug development, particularly in the vaccines, there is a very lengthy period that basically leads to the final study. The final study is the study that all regulators in the world will ask you to do to prove that the vaccine is safe and effective. When you start the study, there's no way back. Usually it's happening with thousands of people. This one happened with 46,000 people. Once you start it, you can't change a thing. And the study will take a year or so. But you can't change a thing. And it is maybe 80% of the cost happens in that last study. All the other It is efforts to make sure that you have a candidate that you can put through the study to prove that it works, that gives you the best shot in developing something. In this development, the final study was identical with the studies that we would do at any single point of time. We were able to run it faster because FDA would collaborate with us. We would ask a question about the protocol. Instead of coming back in 4 months, they would come back in 4 days because it was their priority. The second was that it moved fast because people raised immediately their hands to enroll. When we said we have a vaccine to test, who wants to volunteer? We didn't know what to expect. Immediately, people came. So we were able to recruit 46,000 people in times that we'll never be able to do before. The third, and unfortunate, there was a lot of disease around. The idea is that you vaccinate 46,000 people either with placebo or with vaccine. Nobody knows if you got the vaccine or the placebo, not the patient, not the doctor, not anyone. It's hidden with a barcode in a computer, and you need special protocol to get into the computer. So 2 different people need to log in, so it's highly regulated. And then you wait those people to see, you let them live their lives, and you wait to see how many will get the disease. And once you have a lot of people that get the disease, you unblind the data, and you see those that they got the disease were vaccinated or not, to see if you can make a difference. We had a lot of disease, so we got enough numbers of people very fast. So that was the study. But before this study, a process that usually takes 6, 7 years, we did it in 4 months. And that is because money was not an issue. So we did things in parallel. We start building manufacturing without knowing not only if we have a vaccine, but which one would be, because we were working with 4 candidates. So our manufacturing started manufacturing of all 4 candidates, and then we selected 2 to go to the phase 3, and they dropped everything that they made of the other ones, and they focused how to make the 2, and then they dropped 1 eventually. We were using digital. We used digital to an extremely high degree to design the vaccine and to design the clinical trial. So things that happen in parallel, they condense this part. So the final study was the same, but we entered into the study with a lot of risk because we didn't give us enough time to choose the right candidate. We did it very fast. Hopefully, we were smart in the way that we designed the preclinical so that we were able to select the best candidate.
Well, and one of the other challenges that struck me is that this disease was moving geographically, right, through the population. And so you had to guess, I mean, an educated guess, but you had to try to guess where it would be next. And that was sort of a trial and error, right? I mean, it was tricky
Very
to figure
dynamic.
that out. Yeah.
We didn't do, for example, as usually, 40, 50 sites. We did 160 sites, so that we are, one site is one hospital, for example, spread in the country and in other countries. And then we were trying to recruit people in places that we thought in 1 or 2 months they will have the disease. Because if you were doing it in place that they currently have the disease, usually they were taking measures, lockdowns, nobody would have the disease in a month, right? So we were trying to do that by seeing who is doing lockdowns or not, because that played a role, how the virus is moving. Epidemiologists were doing that. And they developed very accurate algorithms. Actually, that was another one of the digital advancements that we did, so that we can accumulate a lot of disease, because most of our subjects in the study were in areas that there was a lot of disease.
And then you also had to make sure that you were signing up people from diverse populations. That's something that you talk a lot about in the book, too. The tricky part of that is they're volunteers. You can't make people sign up. So how do you go about trying to make sure that that's a diverse population that's participating?
Very much you give instructions and you go to places that minorities are living in big numbers. So we knew that the study needs to reflect the demographics of the population that the vaccine eventually will have to do it. And we knew that, for example, African Americans, they had more disbelief to these medical interventions. Typically, they are not participating in clinical trials, and they have disbelief also in these studies for multiple different reasons. We knew that if we have studies that at least double digit of African Americans were part of the study, that would be a very good argument for potential patients to feel comfortable. Yes, it was tested also on us. Same goes with Latino. Latinos also, they don't have very high trust necessarily in these studies and trials. So we tried very, very hard to, particularly African Americans and Latinos, to have in very big percentages, and we were able to do it.
And luckily, you know, those populations, even though there was some initial hesitancy, that we've seen an improvement.
Very big.
About that. Can you talk to us a little bit about the difference in, here in the United States at least, in the administrations? You know, many of the health officials remained constant. Tony Fauci, although Rochelle Walensky took over later on, but you talk a little bit in the book in particular about an exchange that you had with Jared Kushner about the Trump administration wanting to, after making an initial commitment for how many shots they wanted to order, then wanting to increase the order, which made things complicated for you, shall we say. So, big picture, what were the differences in dealing with the two?
With the two administrations. Look, I think eventually the people that were working in these positions in CDC, in FDA, in the White House even, they wanted the best for the people, but they had very different levels of organization. I think what affected a lot and dramatically the first period was the period of the development of the vaccines that happened under the Trump administration, was that the elections polarized dramatically the situation, and that was wrong. People started thinking that if a vaccine comes before the elections, they will support it. If it comes after the elections, they will not. People start thinking that wearing a mask is a political statement. You wear a mask, you must be Democrat. If you don't, you must be Republican. All of that is nonsense, because you wear a mask if doctors are telling you you should wear a mask. But the fact that was in the middle created tremendous animosity. We had less of that during the Biden administration, because there was not that much of a pressure. And also, we were coming with a solution. So there were vaccines, etc. I would say the fact that we didn't take money from Operation Warp Speed, or let's say from the Trump administration, which I felt will make them happy, because we could be part of them without having to pay us, we could do it on our own dime, didn't work well for them, created the opposite. So I guess they felt that they won't have enough ownership, or we are not the favored candidate, because it would be more difficult to take credit, given that they didn't give us the money. If someone else was coming first that was doing it with their own money, it would be easier to get credit. And that created some problems to us. There were a little bit of friction. Nothing to do with what I say about Jared Kushner, but by the way, in the beginning, it was very helpful. But frictions. We didn't have that with the Biden administration. They were very professionals, and we just moved ahead and did, I think, a great job.
As you say, though, more broadly, obviously, there's been continued politicization of the virus, of the reaction to the virus, of how different individuals approach it, whether people get vaccinated. And there's also, I think, some fatigue with the measures that have been taken. Is all of this going to make it tougher for us to move past it or into a more endemic phase?
Yes, I think these are all things that we need to take into consideration. I think people are tired from measures. So when you are at the edge, maybe you can lift them, maybe not. You are forced to lift them. If you are in a situation that people will die, I'm sure that the authorities will do the right thing and will not lift. But in general, there is a fatigue. So I don't think society can operate under these, let's say, social distancing measures that are affecting substantially the psychology of each individual for long. But that will put more pressure on the virus. Virus will spread way more than if you're taking these measures. Still, I think we can do it now. We can do it because a very big part of the population is already vaccinated. That even for Omicron prevents hospitalizations and deaths, makes a difference. I think that we have now oral treatments at our disposal that are a real game changer, because people will get COVID either because immunity wanes, because they didn't do the third or the fourth dose if it comes, or because they didn't vaccinate at all. So that will happen, and will happen even more, because we are not going to be wearing as much masks, or we could be sitting in a restaurant together with people that maybe are not vaccinated. That's why treatments can play a huge role. So with all of these measures, I think we can live with the virus as we are living with 100 viruses right now in our life.
You know, many people get the flu shot every year, but if you look at the booster uptake, I think the latest figure I saw here in the United States was 29%, compared with something like 65% of the population that's had, certainly the adult population that's had at least one shot. So if you're talking about a fourth shot, or I know you guys are also developing sort of a one shot to rule them all, for lack of a better term, to treat all the variants, how do you convince people that they need to get these?
I think there are two groups of people. Those that have not been vaccinated yet will be very difficult to convince. They were not convinced when people were dying a lot around them, and when the pressure from society on them to get vaccinated was very high. I think those things will get less, both of them. People will start, let's say, because of vaccines and treatments, will not die as much, and the pressure also will be lifted. So I don't think those, we can expect very big numbers of them getting vaccinated. Kids, we expect to see them, but not the adults that they didn't get it. So on the other ones, still I think the compliance with all the requests, if someone says now you need to do it every year, for example, or you need to do the fourth dose, is not going to be the very high percentage that we saw when everybody went to get vaccinated. But I think they are the people that will follow the instructions. So these are two different distinct groups. One will never do even the one, and the other will do the fourth and fifth based on the instructions. If we are able to make it an annual revaccination, which is what is our aim now, we are working on the research with very cool science. It's difficult, but it's very cool, the science that we are applying right now to see if we can make a year vaccine that lasts a year. I think big parts of the population will do it on a regular basis. And the others, good luck and treatments.
Right. Talking about how people view the vaccine and how they view Pfizer specifically, the pharmaceutical industry in general, the reputation improved dramatically during the pandemic. It's leveled off a little bit now just because people are sort of stepping back from the urgency of it. But how do you build on that? How do you continue to maintain and even improve the public view of the drug business?
Reputation comes in drops. You can lose it in buckets. I have to say that we were lucky to demonstrate the value proposition of our sector to society. That's why reputation skyrocketed, and is very, very high right now. We are among the most admired companies, the most loved companies. It's as easy to go down again. So it's not given. You need to continue earning the trust of the society every day. And you can only do it if you stick to principles and you act based on these principles. For us, we made it very clear, patients first. That's number one. And that should be your compass. When you are in front of difficult decisions, you should always make the one that favors the patients, because that's the one that will give you reputation and will give you the financial returns, as I said in the beginning. They are highly correlated. Just do the right thing and you will be rewarded. We did the same, for example, we announced today what we are going to do with Russia. Mm-hmm. It is a very complex ethical issue, right? So you have the situation with an unjustifiable attack from one country to another. It's very clear. There are no blurred lines. One is the victim, the other is the aggressor. Okay, there's not. The world is decides that we are not going to war, but we are going to implement draconian sanctions. Always medicines are excluded from the sanctions. We're excluded in Iran, we're excluded in North Korea, always, because for humanitarian reasons. What we do is medicines for cancer. But we thought about it. What is the right thing to do? And we decided patients first. That was a difficult decision. We can't say that I'm not going to send the cancer medicines for the kids that are having leukemia in Moscow because they were born in Russia under Putin, right? I can't do that. But also we announced that at the same time, we are not doing business as usual in Russia. So we will continue the flow of medicines. Every dollar that we are making in the Russian subsidiary, we will donate to alleviate direct Ukrainian pain, straight to Ukraine. Thank you. So that takes completely out of the equation, maybe you do it for money, maybe, period. But we maintain. The same is with clinical trials. We were running some clinical trials there. That gives money, because clinical trials cost a lot of money. We pay hospitals, we pay physicians, we pay a lot of people to do it. We will not initiate clinical trials in Russia, clearly. They should not profit from that. We will not recruit further patients in the ones that are ongoing. But what about the ones that are already in the middle of a clinical trial? He is testing a new experimental medicine, and he is in the middle of that. Shall we stop? No. We will continue sending to these people this medicine, but we will not do any more. And they know that we are out. So this is, I think, the things that you need to do to earn the trust of society that is watching you every day.
Well, since you bring up Russia, we should note you are European. For those who are not familiar with Albert's background, he is Greek. That is what the accent is. And your parents were Holocaust survivors. And so as a European native and as the child of Holocaust survivors, how do you feel when you hear Vladimir Putin blame neo-Nazis in Ukraine for the invasion, or to say that Russia's invasion is for denazification of Ukraine? What does that say to you about the legacy of the Holocaust in Europe and maybe how it's being perverted now at this point?
Look, Nazis were the first ones that invented the propaganda. Goebbels was the one who said, if you continue saying a lie constantly, eventually will be believed. It's a lie. Right? I'm sure that there are some neo-Nazis in Ukraine. They are not the government, they are not the state, and this is not the reason why Putin goes in. Goes for very different reasons, and he's trying to use an excuse. So that's very clear. Actually, it reminds me the opposite, because from history, I know that this is how things started. Hitler was pushing, and he would kill someone here, like Putin, and do things there. And then eventually, he went into Czechoslovakia. Nobody said anything. And then eventually, he went to Poland. And then it's where the Second War happened, right? So it's a situation that it is very worrying for all of us, and brings to mind a war that was the worst demonstration of humans, right? And the Holocaust was a landmark of it. So I think, I feel, by the way, for the Holocaust, I will tell you another story. There were people that were calling me to say you should stop sending medicines to Russia, right? And some of them, they told me, imagine if, how your mother would feel, because she's a Holocaust survivor, if someone would send medicines to Nazis, right? And I wrote actually today in the morning to a friend that told me that. I said, look, my mom, she was sexually abused by Nazis in the prison. If she knew that I'm sending medicines to the kid of the guy who did that to her, she would feel very proud for me, because the kid has nothing to do.
So as you look at that situation as it unfolds, and I know you're a CEO, you're not a political leader, but if you're likening this to Hitler's invasion of Czechoslovakia as sort of the beginning, should the US be doing more? Should Europe be doing more?
You said it right. I'm not a politician, so I can't comment on that. And they are very complex issues. What I think it is that each one of us needs to do the right thing. And where I'm responsible, I struggle, and I feel I did.
Something else you said reminds me of another issue that I know that you have dealt with, and that is what you said about Goebbels. You say a lie often enough and people take it as truth. This has happened to you as well during this pandemic. It's happened to Pfizer, it's happened with things regarding the vaccine generally, but with you personally. So how have you dealt with that, the sort of disinformation that has been out there about you and about the company?
I worried more about the consequences of this misinformation that had to people because it was used. For example, they wrote that I was arrested by FBI. So websites, me, pictures with FBI officers next to me, all fake, right? And taking me to the prison. The same website the week before had published that the Pope was arrested by FBI. And so, I mean, I laughed, right? A week later, they published that my wife died. So I have a picture of my wife, which is in perfectly good health, and they say, I forced her to take the vaccine, she didn't want. Actually, she was after me, give me the vaccine, give me the vaccine. That was in reality. But, and then she died because of the vaccine. Then I was very pissed because that was very personal, it was affecting my family, right? I needed to call her parents to tell them that, you know, she's alive, don't worry, don't listen to any of that. They are criminals, those people, and they are Goebbels. They know that they can throw, they knew very well that their wife is alive and that I was not arrested by FBI. But they did it because they want to convince poor people not to take the vaccine. Because look, his wife died from the vaccine. You want to die as well? And this is the people that will pay the consequences. Because those people will die. Not because they take the vaccine, because they won't take it. So I was very upset with that.
Have you had to, both personally but as a company, have you had to change the way you think about getting your message out? And not just getting your message out in a positive way, but preventing some of that information and disinformation from getting out there?
Yeah, I think we constantly improved, but the basic principle was that there will be so big scrutiny no matter what. So we should be very transparent. We should never leave something in the shadow, because they will find it anyway, and they will make it a big deal. So we were out of our way to make sure that everything, even insignificant things, are posted in the website. All scientists can see it. We posted the protocols. We are posting results. Very unusual. We never do that before their studies are final, just phase 1 before the phase 2. So we do everything that we can to change that.
And I would also say, as a business journalist, the fact that I'm sitting on stage with the CEO of Pfizer would have been pretty unusual 5 years ago, 10 years ago, because the company did not do as much public-facing commentary, right? So you write about that in the book as well, that you made a decision that you were going to be out there more. Is that part of the reason why you wrote the book as well?
I think, no, it's not that why I wrote the book, but it is, the decision was that we realized, and we discussed multiple times, should it be me? Should it be our chief scientific officer? Should it be multiple scientists that develop the vaccine? Should it be the public affairs group? And I think my accent, the Greek accent, made me look sophisticated. So I scored very high into these things. And I continued doing that. The book I wrote for different reasons. The book I wrote because I knew that the events of these 8, 9, 10 months changed the course of history. It's not the financial benefits to the world, which were significant, or the human pain. Only in the US, 10 million hospitalizations were avoided because of vaccinations, and we had most of the vaccinations as Pfizer. 1 million deaths. 2.5 points of GDP is calculated. That was the economic benefit to the country because they did the vaccination. But those will be forgotten. I think what was the big thing that changed the course of history forever, it is that the world was scared, was in darkness, and suddenly science brings hope. This thing Thank you. This thing that human ingenuity can overcome challenges and light will be seen at the end of the tunnel, I think it is what is the big thing that everybody will remember, how grandchildren were able to meet with grandparents after a year and a half. But I knew that history is written from multiple different ways. Depends where the historian sits, has a very different point of view. He may sit in the left, in the right, in north or south. It's very different. And I wanted to make sure that I leave behind a record of how things happen from my perspective. And the second is that because of what you said, that I was the face of the company, everybody knew me. But there were thousands of people that worked for it. And there were 40 or 50 people, and I'm referring to them in the book, that really made it happen with a lot of sacrifice. I wanted to make sure also that I leave a record about the contribution of each one of them, so that it is not going to be disputed by anyone in the future.
So this was the big achievement, obviously, for the company and for the world. I want to move past it for a moment, because now you have this huge thing that the company achieved, and you still have to go on, and hopefully sales of the vaccine will go down and sales of treatments will go down because we'll be moving past it. So now you, as the head of this company, after doing this huge thing, you have to move forward, obviously. So what's the next?
More breakthroughs that change patients' lives. We are working on multiple fronts. Oncology, cancer is one of the very big. Other infectious diseases. We are working on cardiovascular diseases. We are working on metabolic diseases. We are working a lot of rare diseases, particularly on gene therapy, that will be equally revolutionary as the mRNA technology. So that's what we do. And if time passes after many years and we don't bring medicines that really can change patients' lives, we will lose the sign of our reputation. Our stock price will go down, and CEO will not be a hero anymore, right? Will be, let's find the next one. So it's important that we keep doing what our purpose is calling us. And that's true for every company. If you stop doing it, you are not relevant anymore. I hope we will be relevant. And I think that we have not only the right people and the right infrastructure, but we have the right culture in the corporation to be able to be the ones who will bring solutions.
Part of that culture that you talked about, even pre-COVID, when you were head of the biopharmaceuticals unit, you sort of reorganized to give people more autonomy. And you also, obviously, as head of Pfizer, found these various experimental investments. BioNTech is the example I'm talking about. When you talk about all the people who led to the development of the vaccine, certainly the couple that founded BioNTech are a big part of that. What's the next thing that you're seeing? What are you most excited about? If mRNA was the big development that led to these vaccines, what are you really excited about that's coming along?
First of all, let me say that I'm very, very optimistic. I think the next decade, we will all live a scientific renaissance. This will be driven with advancements not only in biology, but also in technology. And the two of them, as they come together, they produce synergistic effects of great scale. So diseases that we were not able to find solutions until now will be the decade that they will see a lot of them. And I think Pfizer will play a very big role. But we need to go differently about it if you want to benefit from this scientific, let's say, activity that is happening. You can't bet too much in-house. You need to position yourself as the partner of choice for the biotech ecosystem. Could be academia, could be smaller biotechs. They need to feel that by partnering with Pfizer, their ideas not only will become better product, but will become faster, will be able to be produced at scale, and the financial benefit will be equally shared between the two partners. rather than go all to the big. Once you convince them that, and this is what we are doing, we will have a lot of ability to bring breakthroughs that change patients' lives, but not alone.
And not alone either in the larger health ecosystem, right? So I want to talk about that a little bit as well. At the end of the book, you talk about the need to structure pricing better in the industry. And basically the conventional wisdom among pharmaceutical companies is that if you cap prices, that research and development is going to suffer. But if that means at the end of the day that you get better accessibility, what's the trade-off between better accessibility and profitability and R&D?
I want to make it clear, and I have made it very clear, I'm against status quo. We cannot maintain the situation that we have right now in the US. But let me be very explicit about what are the problems that we are facing. When you speak about drug pricing, there are two different things, separate. One, it is what is the cost of the medicines to the healthcare system. How much Medicare will have to pay Pfizer for the medicine? How much employers, like Coca-Cola, JP Morgan, they have to pay Pfizer for the medicines of the people. This piece, it is 12% of the total healthcare cost that Coca-Cola has to pay, or Medicare. And in fact, it's going down, not up. So Pfizer, for example, in 2021, we had minus 5% of pricing. Our business, excluding COVID, it was 11% growth in volume, 5% decline in price, 6% total value. All right? So by definition, cannot be the big problem because you are 12%. But we have in the headlines of the newspapers, 80 or 90% is about drug pricing. It's not about diagnostic tests cost a lot, surgeries cost a lot, MRIs cost a lot. It is medicines cost a lot. Why? Because they do cost a lot. I'm come to the second one. Americans are paying for their medicines like if they don't have insurance. They pay almost everything out of the pocket. And actually, they pay it in higher numbers than we charge the system. That needs to change. So it could have a cost if we say that the patients, they don't have to pay anymore out of the pocket. They will have to, insurance will cover it. Someone needs to pay that cost to the insurance. I'm pretty ready to contribute to that. And in fact, I'm pretty ready to take the entire cost if needed, right? But this needs to change. And I'm a strong advocate of that needs to change, no matter what will be the cost, because that will create stability. Right now, if you see the pharma industry from financial point of view, we are having multiples on average, half of what S&P 500. Basically, half of the average corporate America. The reason is because there's an overhang that something will happen in the US with pricing, and there will be a correction, etc. We need to take that away so that we can let a fair system provide incentives for innovation and access to patients.
So what exactly does that system look like? What does
I think some of the provisions that the Biden administration had, I agree a lot. They had the provision that Medicare will have a cap at $2,000 per year that will break into equal every month. So nobody will pay more than $150, irrelevant if it has cancer or whatever, per month, right? That will be a significant advancement. I want even more in this direction. Now, there are other provisions that the Biden administration has that I don't agree, right? But eventually they have to do what they have to do. They don't have to agree with me or with everyone. They have to do what they think is the best for the people. But that one, I agree. They should do it.
And one of the other rare disputes that you describe in the book.
And by the way,
yes, please.
This 2,000, we pay. It's not that someone else, okay? Right. The biggest part, they're asking the pharma to pay. And I agree, it's the right thing to do. Let's pay it.
One of the other disputes you mention in the book with a member of the Biden administration is with the trade rep, and it has to do with intellectual property. And you defend intellectual property protections in the book. Just briefly, because you talk about it at length in the book, what is your defense? Why can't you just say, okay, here's the formula for the vaccine, let's let anyone around the world make it?
Yeah. First of all, it was not the issue, the intellectual property. Moderna had waived their intellectual property. No one made any vaccine to start with, right? Because they can't. This is the top-notch technology. It requires highly specialized manufacturing sites and highly specialized people. Secondly, the issue why you couldn't make enough for the world was because you didn't have raw materials. Because we scaled up dramatically the production. What was actually in the way was lipids. We don't make lipids, and we started making lipids so that we can do it. But what is the funny thing? Actually, what is not funny at all. I take it back. I regret. I'm ashamed that I said it's funny. It's unacceptable. Is that I kept telling, for example, WHO or the US Trade Representative that we don't have enough for all in these first 6 months. We will have more than enough for all in few months. But when this time comes, those countries are not ready to absorb the vaccines. It's not like here that you can go 15 minutes in a CVS and get a vaccine. Over there could mean that they have to walk a day and a half to go to a vaccination center in Africa, right? What we need to do is to build infrastructure, vaccination centers during the first 6 months. So when the vaccines are available, they can distribute it. And also I told them, vaccine hesitancy in Africa is going to be way, way, way bigger than you see in the US, for example. Because it's clearly that the poorer the country, the less the educational level, the more the ground is good for misinformation. And indeed right now, the US has 1 billion doses that they bought from us that they give to Africa for free. They bought it from us at cost. We don't make money, they don't make money. But then they give it for free to we don't lose money, right? But they don't, they give it for free. Africa can't take it. They asked every country to stop sending vaccines because now that we started sending, nobody wants to get them. Very few wants to get them. They have hesitancy, and it's very challenging to do that. That's the problem over there. And that's what they should have done.
You do talk in the book a lot about equity also, about helping out the global south, about getting vaccines to the countries that need it most and who cannot as easily afford it as the West. And I wanted to ask you, in our last few minutes here, there's been this backlash against what has been called wokeism, right? This idea of equity in so many different ways. Do you think it's gone too far? I mean, it seems like you really integrate this idea into how you manage Pfizer.
No, it didn't go too far, and we need to do way more than that. I think we need to have some basic transparent principles. And one of them is tier pricing, for example. You need to say that you are not going to charge the same high-income countries with very poor countries. I think otherwise you can never have equity. I don't think equity is giving the same to all. Equity means giving more to those that they need more. This is equity. And those countries, they need more. I don't think we have done enough yet. Pfizer wants to do, or I try to overcome a lot of bureaucratic obstacles to do way more. I want that there will be no medicine which is innovative medicine, which is patent protected. Let me use the terminology that is used. There should be no patent protected medicine that doesn't reach any country in Africa because of cost. Zero, not a single one. And we can do it, but there are a lot of bureaucratic obstacles to do that.
Maybe we'll end it on a lighter note, if we could. You you look very relieved. You made a lot of really interesting connections from this fight. You got friendly with the EU President Ursula von der Leyen, Bibi Netanyahu of Israel, and then his successor, Naftali Bennett, Alex Gorski, who was then the CEO of Johnson & Johnson, now executive chairman. Was there any time, were you ever like sort of starstruck, or was there anyone that you encountered in this fight? Well, obviously it was a very serious and weighty issue that you were dealing with, but any connections where you were just really excited to make as this was going on?
Look, first of all, I was able and fortunate to talk to many leaders, and they are all very interesting personalities. But the one that is counterintuitive because I'm Jewish was when I met the Pope. And it was in the Vatican, and he received me to thank me for everything that he did for humanity. And it was very impressive, the environment of the Vatican and him coming. And he told me, thank you so much for everything that you did to save the world. And then I came with this, and I tell him, Holy Father, you know, all the times that we had to make difficult decisions, we felt that someone up there is guiding us. And he was so happy that I told him that, and that was a very special moment for me.
That's excellent. I like that. That was not necessarily what I would have expected.
I know.
There you go.
I get a lot of that.
Albert, thank you so much. This has really been a fun conversation. Thank you all.